everybody. Just making sure our sound and everything is good to go before we dive in. I've been seeing in the chat, we have some new faces today, which is really exciting. Hi to Lauren and Judy. You guys are always right on time. I love it. I hope you guys have been having so much fun with this challenge. We are already on day 2. Good morning, everybody. Kylie is joining today. Jacqueline. This is so awesome. And if it's Saturday where you are, happy weekend. I think it's always the perfect activity to do on a Saturday, especially if it's cold, because it's a good indoor activity. So just want to say hello and thank you so much for joining in this challenge. We have done 2 days already. I cannot believe that. I feel like when I do things like this and there's countdowns that the days go by faster because you recognize how much you've done already. If you need to access the replays, they are available on my YouTube channel, so you can just go ahead and hit the 12 Days of Watercolor Christmas Challenge. There's a whole playlist, so you can just see all of the videos together. So it should be very easy if you are on the email list. I send out a little reminder every day, so if you need, you can always access the videos straight from the email. Today, I'm really excited about this one because we are going to be doing a winter landscape, and it's going to be, I was doing a little demo here. So this is kind of a nice little preview of what we will be doing. Is everybody able to see everything okay? Hopefully. Okay, Lynn is here. Good morning from a wet and windy Ontario. Ooh. Well, this is going to be the perfect way to spend a rainy day. So this is kind of the vibe that we're going for today for our winter landscape. We're going to do a sunset in the background, and then it's going to be a snowy foresty. I'm so excited. So without further ado, I'm going to flip you all around, make sure and gather your supplies. I know I mentioned this yesterday, but I'll just mention it one more time that I have talked about all the supplies that I love to use in the very first day of the challenge in the beginning of that video. So go ahead and pop back there if you need to recap anything for supplies. But as always, you're totally welcome to ask me any questions, especially during this live session. And I will take a peek at the chat every so often. Yesterday I talked about paper. So if you're curious to know more about or an in-depth talk about watercolor paper, that was yesterday on day 2. So, alrighty, I am going to begin flipping around and getting my station all set. Alrighty, scoot that over. Here we have the printable outline. So we'll just paint a few trees. There will be a horizon back here and the sunset in the background. Lots of rain, wind, and very chilly. Ooh, that does not sound fun. We had a dreary day earlier this week, so I totally know. Alrighty. Paint supplies, again, I just kind of resort to these 3 brushes, and I have my paint set over here, and I'll just scoot this out of the way. Going to try and keep my water down here so I don't cross my hand into the video as much during the painting. Alrighty. Let's get that. I might scooch it out a little bit. All right, cool. Here we go. All right, so to begin, let's first start with doing this forefront or this tree in the foreground. And we are going to first begin by doing, we're going to work in sections. So the reason being is because I want the snowy pieces of this tree to blend in with the darker, which would be the needles of the tree underneath the big you know, heavy snow that's sitting on this pine tree. So we'll have to switch colors and work our way down this tree. And we'll do a same approach. It doesn't need to be as detailed on these trees because they are in the background, getting a little more blurry. And then we'll have a nice horizon back here of a tree line. And then our snowy mountains here, and then the sunset. So let's go ahead and grab some water, getting our paints activated if you need to do that. I started while I was doing a little warm up, so some of them are already ready to go. And I am going to use mostly a blue color here. Let's see if I can find a little space in my palette. So that'll be the shade that I use with mostly water, a little bit of paint for creating our snowy pieces on our tree. So as I begin up top here, I'm just going to paint a nice light outline and leaving a lot of white of the paper for our snowy pieces. So with this outline, it's helping me block off some of those areas of snow, and I will go ahead and do that for, I would say, about this far. I just want to start adding in some of the shadow of the snow. So something like that. And you can see that it's still wet. So while it's still wet, this is where we are going to grab a darker color. So getting my paintbrush clean again. I love the Payne's Gray because it's already kind of that darker blue. With the sunset, it's creating a darker green color on the tree with the light. So I have this nice, pretty dark blue all ready to go. I would like to mix that even with the green. So I'll just use this little area of my palette here. I'll grab a little green. You could always mix the green and brown together and add a little blue tint to that. But that's the color I'm going for. So I have a decent amount of paint on my brush because this area underneath the snow is pretty dark. So this is where we get to just do a few little dabs like this. And it is going to start to blend into some of the areas that we already painted, and it's going to be so pretty. If you guys ever have any tech woes, if you're not hearing me or anything, just let me know. I think I want to add a little bit to the top here too. So very flowy. We're just having fun with adding in those darker shadows. So it'd also be a good time to grab a little shade or a shade that's a little different. So I'm just going to go with a pure dark blue and drop some of that in there since most of mine looked pretty green. But if I just drop it in a few areas, it's going to create more dimension in the shadows. I'll go ahead. We can always use a very clean brush and dab in more water if we want that to spread up into the snow a little bit more. So if I went a little too slow or if yours dried too fast, just use your clean, not a ton of water on your brush to help blend that into your snow. And now we will go ahead and repeat that process. So that brings me back to this ultramarine blue with very little on my brush, mostly water. And we'll start to work in the next section down. Having fun pulling some of that darker color down with it, but I'm just running it right along the edges of my snow. Like this. And you might even want to add some back up top just to help outline some of those snowy areas there. So again, this is another wet on wet technique. But we will use some wet on dry just to give a little more detail in the end. I might even take my clean brush and just kind of work it into some of that area of the snow, but I do want to make sure I leave white of the paper because that'll preserve some of that white snow highlights. All right, time to grab our darker colors. So if you have a green, mix it with the blues, the browns, the dark blues. So I have about a medium amount of paint on my brush just because it's such a dark color. And again, I'm just going to run it right along the bottom half of each of those branches. You'll start to see that expand. It's going to dry really, really pretty. Just bring that up closer here. This will look really pretty in a frame. If you just were to put this on a bookshelf or on a collection of paintings for your winter decor, I think that'd be really, really pretty. I'm going to grab a little more of that darker blue and just drop it in and hit it in a few more little areas. The wet on wet technique expands it so much sometimes that you lose the density and the value, the dark value of your paint color. So you can just go back and hit that in a few areas, like so. And maybe even up top here. Mine is still wet, so it's expanding nicely. Just go ahead and add a few more in there. So again, I am just doing fun little marks. I'm not doing anything that's super technical. I'm just having fun with letting the water and the paint play together. All right, getting very close to the bottom of this tree. I'm just going to grab a little more of that pretty blue. I'm just using it straight from my palette there. Do that process again for the last little bit of this, running it right along the lower edge of those branches. Could even add some to the top because those also will have the shadow from the branches on top of it. And it's time for us to grab our darker color again. So this is why I wasn't able to do it this, the light blue process all the way down and then coming back. I just wouldn't have been able to keep it wet enough to be able to do the expansion of the wet on wet technique. So just kind of do a little back and forth. Add some down below here. We'll grab a little more of the blue. Drop that in. Okay, so this is a tree that could definitely use some more of the detail work once it dries, but I have to wait until it dries. Otherwise, I won't be able to control exactly where my little marks will stay. Alrighty, let's move on to our other trees here. They again will have snow, but they don't need to be quite as detailed. So what we're seeing here could be perfectly great for these trees since they are farther and faded into our background. I'll grab our light blue again. And this one is not sectioned off like our foreground tree is, so we are just going to kind of add little bits of blue speckled in there, leaving a lot of white of the paper. So hopefully you can see that okay. This is what the technique I'm using. There's just the very tip of my brush. I am just painting and kind of sectioning off little pieces on my own. And since it's a smaller tree, I can just continue all the way down. Like so. Pick up more paint if you need and water. I don't have too much water on my brush, so I'm able to really control where that paint is going. So that's what I did there. We're not done yet. We're going to add the same type of color scheme from our foreground tree. Might even add a little bit more of water just to help spread some of that, but still leaving the white of the paper. Now I'll go ahead and grab the darker paint. Hit some bottom sections of what we were just painting, that same vibe. So I'm just kind of around. Hitting a few areas like this. And this will be the technique that I'll use as I work my way up. Hoping I didn't work too slowly, that I lost the wet on wet blend. If I did, I'll just pick up more water and start to drop that in there. It should add a little more water and do the bloom technique. And to show a more of like some sparse areas in your tree, you can show that trunk by just doing a little vertical line every so often. Looks darker than our foreground tree, but it is going to dry lighter, so I'm not too worried about that right now. And let's go ahead and do the same technique. And then we can start to move into our really pretty snowy sunset. So I'll just grab that blue again. And with the tip of my brush, just start to show different sections. As I work my way down. Like this. So I worked a little faster that time so I could have a little more of the blend happening. So now I'll quickly transition to the darker color again. Add a little green to that. And let's work again to the top, from the top, and work our way down. I hope you guys are enjoying some music on your end. Alrighty, get to the bottom here. I like to always do little flick motions like that just because it does show the impression of a pine needle. And again, you can show some of the trunk coming through the center. Just hit that in a few areas. Didn't get enough paint. Let's add that back in there. And for the trunk, I do want to show a little bit of brown. So we'll just add a slight amount of brown towards the bottom to paint this trunk, even though that looks like it stands out too much. To make it look a little more natural, we just have to add either the green color or the blue will help neutralize that brown. So I'll just drop in a little bit of that right there. And it already helps to blend that. All right, I think those trees are turning out really pretty. If you need to blend anything or want to make something lighter, all you do is grab a little bit of water and you can run your brush right over the top of some of those areas if you want them to help fade a little bit. For the background, we first need to just show a little bit. Let's say that there's a bunch of pine trees that are kind of layered in the back here. So I'll just take a somewhat of a medium amount of this dark blue and green color, all the same color scheme that we have been using. It's just going to be a little bit lighter. And we're just going to show a little bit of a horizon line in the background. And it's just going to be a few little jagged marks to show kind of a nice tree line back there. And now for the beautiful, like the sunny landscape here. So we have to work in a bigger area and really use that wet on wet technique to get that nice blend. So let's get our brushes nice and wet. And this is where we'll start with, I would say, a true yellow. So this is pretty bright. I'll just dilute it with some water. And let's start to add that base. So we're going to have our brightest area right where the sun is setting, which is right on the horizon. So I will just begin by adding in that color. I'm being careful not to touch my trees I just painted. It will pull up some of that blue color, which of course would make a green. So I'm just going to leave a little bit of a white space there. Pick up a little more water. And I just need a nice light yellow base. of a wash back there, and we're going to drop some of the deeper yellows and oranges into it. And then it's going to fade to a really light color up top here. This would be a good scenario for a larger brush, but I can make it happen with this size 8. So I'm just getting my paper nice and wet here. And now I'm going to grab what's called yellow ochre. So it's just a couple shades darker than the yellow I first started with. And I am going to drop it in right around that edge line there. And to help that blend, if yours didn't blend as much like mine, I'll just grab more water and I'll just help push and smooth that around. Continue to blend that up again. But I want it to be an ombre effect where it's the darkest here and working lighter as it creeps up the sky. And I like the way that it shows a nice bright area there, so I'm going to leave that even. And then to create one more color within our sky would be an orange. So you could take your orange color, you could even mix it a little bit with your yellow, and it'll help to kind of loosen that or lessen that orange. And let's drop that in as well down towards the horizon. You can kind of pick a certain area so it's not all over. And that's going to blend really pretty. We can even take a little bit of that on our brush and work our way up too. I need to grab a little more color there. All right, let's see how that looks there. Hopefully the lighting is kind of showing accurate colors through our screen here. Let's see if I can switch my color profile. Let's see if that helps. If there's any part like where the blue mixed with their yellow, you can always go back through and mop that up if you don't like the way that looks. So for our foreground, now that we've done our background area here, we are going to add just some easy swipes to show our little snow mounds. So I like to use that same blue I was using on my snowy trees. And I have a few outlined here for us, so we definitely need some right here. So I'm just going to take one nice swipe there and make it kind of thicker in areas and thinner in other areas. But we're going to leave a lot of the white of the paper for our snow. And again, we'll do another one. And up front here, for sure, we'll need a nice mountain of snow with a shadow there. And just grab some more of that paint color and you can drop it back in. And then we want to add some more as it works its way in the back. It's not going to be quite as bright. It's getting a little more muted. So I'll just add a few swipes to the background. They're less in focus. So I'll just blend some of that out there. And then once that dries, you could even add more trees too if you wanted really light ones to the background, but I like the way that these ones dried and they look nice and light. The only thing that I would like to do is still add a little more dimension to our foreground tree here. If you have the ability in your palette to use some of your darker blue for snow, I always like to add that in there too in areas that they should be a little bit darker just to make it a little look a little more realistic. So I'll just add it to certain areas, take a little water, help blend that. This 140-pound cold press paper just blends the background really, really pretty. That's why I really do love this 100% cotton paper. So to show our final details, I'll just grab more of my darkish blue green color. I don't want a ton of water on my brush, just enough to help smooth and be able to work with that paint, but I want to be able to control where it's going to go. And just a medium amount on my brush, and we're just going to hit a few different areas. So this looks pretty flat right here, so I'll go ahead and take that brush and just do a few little strokes that make it look like pine needles. So I'm using the very tip of my brush and just hitting some of those under areas, and that's helping to make it look like it's a true pine tree. And I don't think we need that on every single branch, but I am going to do it on a fair amount that just helps to balance this painting. But I don't want it to be too distracting, so, and being careful not to bump anything that could be wet. So I'll add a little bit more there. Need to add some towards our top here. So this is the wet and dry technique, so I'm definitely able to control where those little um, tree marks are happening, which is really nice. It's a nice balance between having a faded background and wet on wet technique in areas and then having the control of paint. So there is where my painting is at. Does anybody have any questions as we worked through our painting today? I don't think it needs any real detail, but you might want to hit some areas towards the center of the trunk where it's going to be the darkest on some of these little trees in the background. And then if you did have this paint, the Dr. P.H. Martin's Bleed Proof White, this would be a good painting to play with that. And you could add it especially if you lost some areas within your trees where you wanted it to be a little bit brighter. You could take some of that paint. I always add a little bit of water to it. And you could make some parts a little bit brighter, snowier. Mine doesn't need a whole lot. I was able to keep a lot of the white of the paper. Or you could add little speckles that make it look like the snow is glistening. One of my favorite ways to soften that is to just run my finger right over the top. Or you could take your paper towel if you don't want to be quite as messy. You could just take your paper towel and blot it. But it just helps to kind of blend and smooth some of those areas into our snow. So there is our snowy winterscape painting for day 3. I would love to see your paintings. Continue to please post them if you're posting or wanting to participate in all the 12 days of the challenge by posting them or submitting them to me. You will be put into a drawing to win the Master Watercolor Dog Breeds course for free. So I would love to see you guys partaking in that because it's a really, really awesome prize to be to win. And I think your chances are pretty good, I will say. So here we are for all 3 days. I'm so excited to see what you guys do with the final outcome of your paintings too. If you guys ever do anything and turn them into cards or put them in a frame, definitely send me or tag me in those pictures too. So I hope you guys have a wonderful rest of your Saturday, and I will be back tomorrow for day 4 of the challenge. And I really look forward to seeing you all then. Thanks so much for being here, and chat tomorrow.